years ago, this Subaru broke down and has been remaining in this garage, and we finally got it running. After the Subaru was ready to go to the junkyard for scraps, we decided to rebuild it. First, we took apart and fixed both sides of the engine by cleaning it. We timed it, replaced the flywheel configuration, started it first try, and there's some problems. But will they be our last? Okay, car doesn't sound the greatest, and there's a handful of problems. We have an oil leak from the turbo, we have a coolant leak from a location that we don't officially know yet, but we think we know, and the power steering is gone. Dax is replacing the power steering pump, not the power steering pump, the power steering hose
and reservoir.
Right there to the reservoir, because the old one, and we didn't see this, but the old one had an unholy amount of cracks in it. You can't see anything, but then when it gets pressure, or when you stretch it, you get a whole ton of cracks on both ends. This time, we're going to disassemble the engine in the smartest way possible. We think we know where the coolant leak is, but one of the last things that we need to do, and we're pretty sure that we know the reason for the grinding, and I'll explain it here in a second. Actually, we're going to explain it at the very end of the video. Here, what we have to do is we have to remove as many parts as possible, but do it in the smartest way. First come coolant lines, then oil lines, then we're going to disconnect the fuel and air lines right here connecting to the underside of the fuel rail and the throttle body, then out come the electrical plugs, and it all comes out as one unit. This is how it's supposed to be done. We didn't do it that way when we originally did it, but that's okay because we've learned. Now, we think that our leak is coming from this oil tube from the turbo. We've also got a little coolant leak. The coolant leak, this is known as the coolant bypass tube, sitting right here on the bottom side. That O-ring is not sitting properly. We have to remove this oil line. This is literally called the water pipes, which is stupid because that's oil and that's coolant. But we need to remove that. We're gonna flip it forward. We're going to disconnect the coolant bypass tunnel, and then we're gonna readjust that O-ring, and then we're gonna put everything down.
Turbo first.
Turbo, yes, we have to do the turbo, but also, one of the really good things is we were worried that that grinding noise was the turbo, but if you look at that, that turbo is still good. There's no scoring, there's no vent fans. So,
Discounter thumbs up.
Turbo is good, and the O-ring gets placed back where it goes. So now we can put back on the intake manifold and reconnect all the oil and fuel lines. Coolant is then going to be drained from the system because we have to get the turbo out, and we want to minimize the spillage as much as possible. While Dax was working on undoing all the connections, I decided to clean up a little bit of coolant that was still resting on the top of the block from the previous spill. This turbo is real hard to get in and out because there's not a lot of leeway and a lot of room to work it. But after a little bit of persuasion, Dax got it out. We figured out where our oil leak was, and it's not what we thought it was. Originally, we thought that it was this hose right here. It kind of looks like it's leaking. It's not. That is perfectly fine, so maybe we didn't even need to replace it. The leak is coming from where the engine block hits the oil feed line for the turbo. And one of the things that we should have done that we didn't do is when we were rebuilding the block is we should have replaced those crush washers. We didn't. And crush washers are only really supposed to be a one-time use thing, unless otherwise specified. So we're gonna get new crush washers for those, and we're gonna bits her back together, put it all back together, and that should solve all of our oil leak problems.
Yeah, Jake.
That's the hope.
Instead of being flat or crushed in the first time, it looks like it's been crushed a couple times with a lip in there, which definitely will cause a leak.
Oh, it's too small. Too small.
We have a round file. I just go and file it out a little bit. Or I have another tool that would work better than this. I'd rather just take this part slow Let me get the right part manufactured, because we have to manufacture parts now here. Because apparently you have to have the year, make, and model for a crush washer.
Thanks, O'Reilly. But Dax, being the masterful mechanic he is, was able to manufacture them to perfection. And those crush washers are gonna hold forever. Now, we have to prep the location once again for the turbo to go in. With there not being a whole ton of room, and with this new turbo being massive compared to the old one, it's real hard to get the air inlet over the compressor side of the turbo. Once that's in, and it's all bolted down, we could start working on putting the coolant and the oil connections in. I got under the car to put the downpipe on, making sure that we didn't forget the gasket, and then on goes the top mount intercooler. All of the connections get placed back in for all the oil and coolant, and coolant gets topped off. We decided to put some fuel cleaner into the system because, well, it's old, and this is also going to help clear out the injectors a little bit. The hood's going to go back on because we feel everything's going to be good, so it shouldn't need to come off again. While Dax lowered the car, I ran upstairs to get my Autel, and then it was time for the car to come out of the garage, hopefully for the last time. Crank position sensor is disconnected. Go for crank 1, 15 seconds. Set for crank 2. What we're doing here is we are cranking over the engine. Subaru has a system integrated into the cranking where if you disconnect the crank position sensor, it allows it to help build oil pressure into the system. Okay, crank position sensor is in. Okay, go on, start. It should be good now, right? Engine fault should either be
should be crank position sensor because we cranked it and that was disconnected, and or it's running lean, which it is running lean because the turbo is huge.
The trouble codes, so it's either crank position or it's running too lean. Crank position sensor, yeah.
Told you.
But she is also running really lean because, as you said, that turbo is massive.
It's big compared to the last one. The last one was like yay big. This new one's like yay big.
What was the max of the last one?
Max is like 17 pounds.
Okay.
Max on this one is 45 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
Which we will never do 45, but doesn't mean it cannot be done.
We rebuilt the Subaru, and now, well, she's done. We have to put the passenger seat in because I'm in the back seat right now. We're going to do another clean of the interior. We're going to take her to get power washed. We're going to do all of that tomorrow, and then we're going to make a cool video to showcase the car.
Yes, we will.
But before it even got tuned and we could showcase it, there was a really big problem. And this time, it was the turbo. Our turbo is already bad. Why this has happened, I don't know. But this is basically the exact same problem that happened with the old turbo. As you can see in the first video, it's doing the exact same thing. The fan blades are beat up, and I don't know why. The good news is this was not what was the grinding noise. The grinding noise, after further information and researching and talking to the manufacturer, that grinding noise that we were having is actually coming from our clutch. The clutch that we installed into this Subaru is what is known as a 6-puck racing clutch. The one that we bought is streetable as well as trackable. It was a little bit on the cheap side, but the reason why it's screaming is because the material used is a copper ceramic. Copper ceramic clutches are made to be run rough, and they're made to operate well at high temperatures. So when you've just started your car, like shown in all of the videos that we've currently posted, or when you're in stop and go traffic, the copper ceramic clutch doesn't really like that. It is built for racing style driving. It's not made for the typical daily driver, but in our case, the one that we bought, rather than being a 3 or 4-puck clutch, it's a 6-puck clutch, which technically classes it into a streetable clutch, but there's a whole bunch of different clarifications and specifications that I'm not going to go through in this video. We know why the car is making the grinding noise. That's good. Why the turbo is dead? We don't know, and that's something that we're going to need to figure out to prevent it happening to a third turbo. This is getting really expensive. But this air oil separator we think could have... No, it can't be the AOS. Unless there is active oil in that, it's not the AOS. Oh, something's really wrong. Oh no. Oh no, 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 no. That is really not good. Like, that's actually really, really bad. You've got to be kidding me! We have to pull the engine again. You've got to be kidding me. Oh my gosh. There's no way! We have to pull the engine. Oh my gosh. I'm back to square one.